Tennell and Jeremy Tennell. Streaming to you recorded from Seattle, Washington. Here we go. Good morning, everybody, and welcome to another episode of the Plowline podcast. I'm your host, Jeremy Tennell, here with my co-host.
Aloha, everyone. I'm Dr. G, and thank you for being here with us today.
And today we are joined by two esteemed guests who are going to be talking a little bit about the independent publishing business. Joel Pitney is the founder of the book publishing and promotion company, Launch My Book. He has also worked as a professional writer for over a decade in journalism, TV series development, and most recently as a ghostwriter.
Hi, it's great to be here. Thanks, y'all.
Great to have you, Joel.
Thanks, Joe. And I have the honor to introduce Sayde Walker, who joined Launch My Book with over a decade of experience as a journalist and marketing professional. She manages all the self-publishing projects and helps authors with book marketing and platform building. In her free time, she sits on several nonprofit boards and serves as a news producer for 3 radio stations. I said that. 3 radio stations on the Oregon coast, and the manager of the Tillamook Farmers Market. She also loves camping with her daughter, gardening, and of course, reading books. Thank you so much for being with us, Sayde.
Yeah, thank you for having me.
So
Okay.
we got, Jerry, why don't you give us an idea of how we got connected with these two?
Oh, yeah, my pleasure. So, well, first of all, I'm actually sitting here in the Starbucks, so I'm hoping it's not too loud. Anyway, so I have been working on my memoir for the better part of 6 years. And I just didn't know where to go with it. And I've been kind of like playing around with getting it published, and found out that, in publishing, it's so nuanced and it's so complex that if you don't have a guide to actually help you through it all, you could get lost in the weeds. And so I kind of like did my research, because that's what I do, is I research. And I'm reading all of these different articles and these blogs, and I come across this guy, Joel Pitney, and he has like all of this great information about how to be a independent publisher. And so I look him up and I'm like, is this guy for real? And I always tell myself there's going to be 3 things that's going to tell me whether I am going to be in relationship with this individual. And the first one was, how does he come across in a lot of his interviews? And he's like so real, right? It's like this guy's real. The next one was just, who did he work with? And so I kind of like looked up and everything. And then I read all about you, Sayde, and I read about the whole entire team. And I was like, these people are pretty cool. And the third one is, how far do they live from us? And then I found out that you all are in Bend, Oregon. And that's where Jeremy's parents are from. And I'm like, okay, all right, universe, this is how it's going to work. I know it sounds a little bit woo-woo, but that's kind of like how we got connected. And so far, it's I have learned so much, and it's because of you all. So just thank you so much for being here. So that's how we got connected.
That's so nice, Jerry. Thank you for saying all those things.
Joel, give us an idea of how you got involved in the independent publishing business, and what was your inspiration?
Well, I kind of fell into it backwards. Like you said, I've been a writer now for quite a while. I was working for a magazine, a spiritual magazine called What is Enlightenment Magazine, based in Massachusetts, back in the late noughts, 2007, 2008. And we were a small magazine, nonprofit, it was kind of an hands on deck situation. And so when the editor-in-chief of the magazine wrote a book and needed someone to help run the promotion for it, I was the token millennial. And they were like, hey, you know how to do marketing stuff. How about you learn how to do this? So I had never done anything with books before. I'd written long form journalism. I'd done a lot of tweeting. I'd never done anything like a book before, and I'd never done any kind of promotion. So we worked with the publisher. That was a traditionally published book. So we had a publisher on board. We also had brought in a publicist. And the publicist came on. And so a publisher is the one who publishes the book. The publicist is the one who promotes it. And then we had another marketing company that did a very specific type of bestseller promotion. And so it was my job to sort of keep all that together and create a coherent marketing plan. So I kind of learned on the job, and that book did really well. We sold a decent amount of copies. We didn't hit the New York Times bestseller list, but we were close. And so the magazine actually went out of print a couple of years later, and I found myself out of a job, and I started a small film company in New York, but film companies don't pay very well, so I needed a side gig, and the publisher said, hey, would you help me promote my next book? You did such a good job with the first one, which was really nice. And so I got brought in as a bestseller consultant, and we for a book called People Tools, and that one we made the New York Times bestseller list on that one, which is super exciting.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I started to get gigs. You know, people started asking me, some through referrals, some through just kind of word of mouth. And in the beginning, I was just a book launch specialist. I was just learning how to do stuff like, you know, how do you build a website for an author? What is social media for an author? And I was still doing some of these bestseller tactics, which are very specific. And I would just kind of sign on with people. And then slowly over time, I just learned more stuff. And I think it was in 2015, I had my first client come to me and say, hey, could you help me do self-publishing? And so I was like, yeah, I can help you figure out how to do that. So I kind of learned how to do that. And so I kind of just developed a bunch of these different skills. And then in 2016, my wife, Laura, who's the other member of the team who's not on camera or on the line with us today, she had a job in fundraising in New York. She was working as the senior fundraiser for the Natural Resource Defense Council. And she didn't want to be in fundraising anymore. And so she said, hey, what if I joined your business? And so she's kind of an operations person. So she kind of came over, and that was when we went from just me being a guy who would help people do stuff to being a formal company that has actual services and that kind of stuff. And so it's been very organic. I think the thing that's always been at the core of our mission is that everybody who works on our team, we love people. And I love working with people to help make their dreams come true, which is kind of what books are in a lot of ways. And we also are very creative. We like to experiment. I mean, we're constantly coming up with new ways and learning new things about how to help authors. I mean, Sayde right now, I feel like every couple of weeks, Sayde and I come up with a new idea for a service that we could test out, you know?
That's awesome. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of been how it's worked.
That's great. Sayde, how did you get into this particular industry, and then where did the fit happen with Launch My Book?
So I'm a journalist by trade. I went to the University of Oregon and got my degree in journalism and worked in journalism for many, many, many years, mostly in newspapers, editorials, that kind of thing. And I moved over to the Oregon coast and worked for several different community newspapers as a reporter and an editor and things like that. And it's such a fun career, but it doesn't pay well. And I got burned out pretty quickly, which happens with journalists. And so I started sort of floating around and experimenting with marketing. I worked for a small web development company, and eventually I landed at a community college, and I was the marketing person for a community college. So got to do lots of writing and design and social media and that kind of thing. And it was a great job, and I loved it there. But I was feeling like, even though I could do the work and the work was fine, I wasn't incredibly passionate about it. And I was really trying to balance the fact that I had a boring job, but I didn't really want to be a boring person. And so kind of trying to separate myself from the work. And the college at the time was going through a lot of transition. And I had a bad day one day,
Oh,
and I just decided to think about what else was out there. And this was during COVID or shortly after COVID, and a lot of jobs were moving, to remote work. And so I thought, well, that really opens things up on a different level. Living on the Oregon coast, there's not very many places I can go. There's not a ton of industry here. So my options here were really limited. So I just started Googling things, and I found a job listing for a social media manager at Launch My Book. And I had never heard of this company. And so, of course, I go to their website and I'm reading their stuff and I'm watching their videos. And I just scoured their website and I thought, this feels like too good to be true. Like, what is this? Like, who are these people? And I kept starting to fill out the application, and then I would like not finish it. And I'd sort of put it aside and be like, no, I don't know. But I have written many books, and mostly fiction. And I've always been interested in indie publishing and always thought that that's something that I want to dip my toes into. I considered, you can go and like get degrees in publishing now, genre fiction and different publishing aspects. And I was applying to schools and thinking like, maybe that's how I will learn how to do some of this work. And then I'm looking at this job and I'm like, oh, okay, well, this is everything I want to know how to do. I just don't know how to do it yet. And I ended up submitting my application, and Laura got back to me right away because there were interesting things within my background that were connected to Joel and Laura, like where we had lived. And I think different people that we knew, like we just had these really like kismic connections that we thought were like so interesting. We just at least had to have a conversation about it. And so I did. I met with Laura, and then later I met with Joel, and I was like, oh, wow, these people are exactly who they say they are. Like they are. And I remember thinking, even if they don't hire me, I just want to be their friend. Like I
yeah.
just want to get to hang out with them and know them. But they did hire me, which was fabulous. And uh, I ended up taking a bigger position than just social media. They needed someone to help with their self-publishing. And I was like, I don't know how to do any of that, but I feel like I could learn. And so it's been a lot of, on the job learning, and which is how Joel has done everything, and that's what is so like why it's such a good fit for me, I think, is everything that Joel knows and was able to teach me are things that he just went out and learned. There
Yeah.
wasn't any like direct formula or any like formal training. It was just like, sure, let's figure it out. And that's like how we approach everything is, okay, let's figure it out. Like, what could we do here, and how could we make it work? So I think I've been here, it'll be 2 years this summer. And I was even thinking it this morning. I was like, oh my gosh, like I knew meeting Joel and Laura would be life-changing for me. And it has just been
Life changing.
life-changing. Yeah, it really has been. It's been more than I could have ever hoped for. So
That's awesome. It's very
Oh
entrepreneurial.
my gosh, that is so amazing. Because it's, I mean, it's relationship.
mhm.
It's about
Yeah.
relationship.
Yep.
And when you find that right relationship, you want to be able, I mean, these are your people, right? It's like
Right.
all of your cells are just kind of like vibrating, and it's like
Mhm.
you connect and you're like, I want to hang around with these people. They bring something out in me, the best, right? It's like so you can
Right.
show up to be your best, so that way everyone could be their best. So in your line of work, I'm sure like myself, right? You have like a lot of these authors that are like, yay, let's do this. Let's make this happen. And some of them come in with like, I want to make $1 million off of this. How do you all, set the expectation for what's really out there?
Well, yeah, I mean, for me, and I think Sayde is similar, but for me, the whole thing, I set expectations right up front before we even start working together. This industry, if for anybody who's been tracking this industry over the last 5 to 10 years, there's been an explosion of interest in self-publishing. There's
Hmm.
a lot of companies that are popping up. I actually recently wrote an article about this on Jane Friedman's website. Everybody should check out Jane Friedman for great information about book writing, publishing, and promotion. Um, about this kind of phenomenon of all these companies popping up, and unfortunately, in that there's a lot of predatory practices and a lot of expectation inflation is what I think of it as.
Mhm.
Um, People who write a book, it's a very aspirational thing. I wouldn't say it's quite conducive to delusion, but it definitely borders on that. And so there's a lot of companies out there that prey on that. And so
Yeah.
whether they're being directly dishonest or allowing people to expect things that they shouldn't, it's I would say the vast majority of people are doing that. And again, that's not what I got into. I'm not doing that for this, this for that. Sorry. So what I do is when I talk to someone on the phone, the first thing we do is we make sure that none of our content, none of our marketing, none of our blogs, nothing on our website does any of that, even has any semblance of that. You're going to make it overnight. You're going to be you're going to be a best-selling author. You're going to be, on your second book, you're going to be making 6 figures and you'll only have to write for two hours a week. It'll be amazing. We're not doing any of that. And then when I get on the phone, I'm brutally honest with people. I want to talk to everybody. Anybody who wants to work with us, I want to talk to them. I want to find out who they are. I want to know what their goals are. I want to know what their expectations are. And then I will lightly and sometimes more heavily tell people, look, you are not going to make your money back on your first book. You're just not gonna,
Yep.
that's not the way self-publishing, honestly, even traditional publishing, unless you can get an advance, you are not going to make your money back. It's just not how it works. Now, I did an interview a few weeks ago with a guy named Michael Larson, who's a legendary literary agent who wrote the book How to Write a Book Proposal. And he's the founder of the San Francisco Writers Conference. And he was saying it takes 3 books to start making money.
That makes
That's
sense.
been his experience. You want to write 3 books that sell themselves. That's his whole philosophy. And if you want to know more about that, check him out. You can also check out the interview. But that to me affirmed our philosophy as well.
Mhm.
That launching a book is not something you should expect to turn a profit on immediately. It costs a lot of money to do all the different things. You've got to, you got to bring in an editor to help you, whether it's a developmental editor or a copy editor or a proofer, and that costs money. There's also the opportunity cost that it takes, if you're a business owner like y'all, you have to spend time writing when you could be spending time bringing in clients and doing your
Yeah, we
consulting.
feel that. Yeah.
So you spend a lot of money on this whole thing, right? And then when it's time to publish, you either have to spend money to try and put together a book proposal and try to get a literary agent and then pitch it to a big traditional publisher, right? You'll usually need to invest some money in building a platform for your audience. You need to, build followers. You need to actually have an audience. That costs money. That costs time. You have to pay a company to do that unless you're doing it yourself. And then when it gets to actually producing the book, you have to hire a company like ours, or if you're going to DIY it, you're going to have to hire people to do the cover design, do the interior design, right? Unless you happen to be born with all these skills, you're going to have to pay people to do stuff. And we haven't even gotten into marketing yet, right? Sayde and I are writing an article right now because we get so many people who spent all this money to get their book ready. They have no money left over for marketing and they just hope that it's going to start selling. And we're like, no, you need probably at least half, if not the same amount that you spend on production to use for marketing to even have a fighting chance of this book getting into the hands of the people you want it to get into the hands of. And when you've done all that calculus, and even if you're self-publishing where you get the majority of the royalties, you are not going to make all that money back on that first book, right?
Right.
And so I want to work with people who don't expect that, because I don't like operating in unreality.
Yeah.
That puts a lot of moral pressure on Sayde and I, right? If we're working with people who think that we're going to turn a profit or the services that we provide will pay for themselves. We just are not comfortable working that way. So that was a long answer to a very simple question.
That's a good answer.
It was a good answer. Sadie, you want to add to that?
I would just say that, it almost like we're brutally honest and we're not being negative about that. We're being really realistic. And Joel definitely does a great job of setting us up for success from the beginning because he's having these conversations with dozens of people all week long who are looking for advice or they're thinking about indie publishing or they're thinking about traditional publishing, whatever the thing is, and they're looking for someone to just kind of play it straight. But then, if they hire us, I am continually having these check-ins with authors about like, hey, like, let's keep our feet on the ground. Let's really manage expectations through this whole process because there is something. Everybody says, oh yeah, I know, I'm not going to make $1 million. As you get into the process of self-publishing and your book starts to come alive And it goes from just this manuscript to all of a sudden you're seeing what the interior is going to look like. And we're designing the cover. And then you have a printed proof. And you kind of start to float like you're in Mary Poppins. And, now you're on the ceiling. And I have to kind of, bring people back down and be like, look at, you think this book is wonderful. I think this book is wonderful. But that doesn't mean that people are going to discover it automatically on its own. I don't know, Joel, maybe you know the statistic, but the number of new books that hit Amazon every single day is astronomical. And so that's a lot of noise that you have to wade through. And Amazon is not going to give you any preferential treatment unless you're selling books, unless you're getting customer reviews, unless they're kind of seeing things happening, then okay, maybe they'll start to show your book to other people. But you really have to, come at this with a marketing plan, and not everybody does. And so sometimes there's sort of this anticlimactic moment of your book launches, it's live, it's out there, and nobody's bought it.
It's like crickets.
And you're
crickets.
like, yeah. And that's, that's hard, but that's the reality of indie publishing is, now, okay, great. Now you have a book, now you have a product. What's your plan for marketing it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think one of the things, one of the values as well to working with a group such as yourself is, that authors are producing this thing that is, writers are producing this thing that's in their head, and the writer that might be a bit more entrepreneurial, so they're doing as much of this process for themselves, right? Good for them. But there's such a value in getting feedback, and getting perspective, that it really can't be undersold. That is such an important process to to this whole experience.
So with indie publishing, that's the direction that I'm going. And I had this crazy expectation that I wanted to like write the book and get it launched by July, and it's like, April.
Last July. Yeah.
And so it's like having that conversation where, you and Sayde and Joe and Laura was like, yeah, right. And so it's like you approached it in a way where I heard what you were saying, that, it's like, come on, Jerry, it's not going to happen. And also with there was just the way I felt afterwards made me feel like, okay, I can change my expectation. It doesn't have to be in July, but I felt guided, and that's one of the things that was really important. And so with indie, being an independent publisher, writing the book, it's something that, especially for me, I write from the heart, right? It's like, that's one of the things that I do. I write from the heart. And sometimes I can just pour a whole lot out onto one page. So sometimes I feel like my writing is great. This is awesome. And then I give it to someone else and they're like, no. How do you all work with that? Because there's people that pour out their heart, right? And so it's like, how do you give them the feedback to where it's not going to bust them at the seams and like, my dreams are over?
Well, so yeah, that's a great question. And I learned something about, I had a writing teacher. This was years back when I was in New York and I was getting into TV and film, and I took a course on screenwriting from this guy. His name was Jake. I forget his last name. We called him Guru Jake, me and my film making partners, because everything he said was so inspiring. And he had this rule about feedback that I have maintained ever since. And I do this in any context I'm in, dealing with writing or anything creative, is that you should always give your feedback in the context of what the author is trying to achieve.
Oh.
So you're never saying, well, I don't think this works because right? Because art is subjective, first of all. So who are you to know for sure if this is right or not? It's very subjective. And I have seen plenty of things in my own experience and from other people where somebody loves something and the other person hates it. Right. And we're talking about even like genuine works of art. Right. So I always think about that. I always think, well, what are you trying to achieve? You know, what is your aspiration? What is the highest potential that you have for this that you want? And then I give my feedback in that context. So I'm not saying, oh, this sucks, it's not worth it. I'll just be, I try to think, well, you know, is there a way that you could bring, you know, if it's a memoir, you know, and I can tell someone's holding it back a little bit, you know, and they're being a little inauthentic. I could say, was there a way that you can bring more of your, you know, your passion through your story, for instance? Or, you know, I was recently doing a manuscript review for someone who has a book on, they had a book on it was a part memoir, part self-help about suicide because they had been through an experience themselves. And they wanted me to review the manuscript and give them constructive feedback. And so when I read it, I had a hard time reading it at first because the book had been flipped. So the story part was put second and the advice part was put first. And that made it really hard to go in. And so what I told him was like, look, I think you should actually flip this. Lead with your story. That's how you're going to compel people. And if you really want to help people, which is why he wanted to publish it, you really want to help people, you know, get through this extremely challenging episode, lead with your story. That's going to bring them in. Don't just start giving them advice right up front. Lead with your story, hook them in, bring them, and then give them the advice on the back end, you know. And so that was, you know, that to me is an example of trying to give them feedback in the context of what they really wanted to do. And it's great. Now he's in the process of rewriting right now and he's excited about it. He's really helpful.
That's yep. And I think it's safer to get constructive feedback from someone you're not married to.
Oh, that's
just
true.
to be honest.
Yeah, that is definitely true. Although I will say my wife, Laura, again, the third member of this team, she is a copy editor and I have her copy edit almost everything I write, which is very challenging, but I trust her. So
yeah.
Exactly. Jeremy does the same for me. And, you know, but when it comes to, it's like, can you go a little bit deeper? He tells it to me, but I don't hear it because then, you know, I mean, it's like, oh, you're so critical of this, but somebody else tells me it and I'm like, oh, I can hear it. And he'll be like, I just said the same thing. I'm like, no, you didn't.
right. Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Marriage. Yep.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah. So give us an idea of the breadth of services that you'll provide for a client. And as I understand it, it's fairly a la carte, right? Like there's a lot of picking and choosing.
Our philosophy, and I say ours because, you know, I know I'm the founder of the company, but Sayde's really shaped our company significantly in the 2 years she's been here as well. Our philosophy is, I want everyone to pay the least amount possible for their book launch. I want everyone to, because the thing is, no one has an infinite budget. I mean, some people do. I've worked with people who had more or less infinite budgets. And so they could just say, all right,
do it all.
I'll take everything. Fine. Great. That's fine. But most people are not that. And so I always feel like you need to figure out what you can DIY and what you need to hire for. And then there's always going to be some gray area. Right. And so, so we try to set ourselves up, you know, in such a way where people can just bring us in for a little piece, or they can hire us. And I try to be objective with them about, hey, look, I think, you know, oftentimes people will come to us with a book that they're going to, you know, that they're going to promote. And I'll be like, well, you know, you don't, I can tell you're good at writing marketing copy. So don't hire us to write marketing copy. Do that yourself. But the thing is, we've got this promotion that's going to be able to get the book into the hands of thousands of people. And I'm not exaggerating. And I'm not, we can give you that, save your money for something like that. Right. Or someone will come, you know, I talked to a guy today. He had written this book that sounded really interesting. But he had his wife design the cover and she's not a cover designer. She's a great artist, but she's not a cover designer. And I was like, if you're going to spend money on us for marketing, I basically said, don't spend money on us for marketing unless you have us redesign your cover.
Yeah.
Right. Whereas for some people, I'll say your cover's fabulous. we're not going to touch it. What
Mhm.
you've done is great. So that's kind of how we roll on that.
Yeah.
Yeah, because we don't want our authors to fail, but we also don't want to fail. So
Right.
Yeah.
if we think that something is not working, or a specific promotion won't work for that kind of book or whatever, for the sake of selling you stuff.
Yep.
Sadie, give me an idea of how you set up a marketing plan for a client. So they've gone through the process. Now they're trying to figure out how to promote this thing.
Yeah. So, I mean, we have conversations all through the publishing. If someone has come to us for self-publishing, and generally when they do that, we are designing their interior, we're designing their cover, we're setting up their distribution channels, we're going to create the ebook. Sometimes we're going to write the marketing copy that goes on, Amazon and Barnes and Noble and things like that. That's kind of like a full self-publishing package. Maybe we're also doing an audiobook. There could be other pieces that sometimes happen, but all along we will be having conversations about marketing, about,
Mm,
because people want to plan, right? They're going, okay, so how, when can I start telling family? When can I announce it on social media? I want to do a book signing at Barnes and Noble. At
yeah.
what point can I reach out to Barnes and Noble to do that? So, pretty soon they're kind of they're thinking about these things, and they're wondering about timelines, and so, and it always takes longer than people think it's going to. I think sometimes, people are attracted to indie publishing because they're like, oh, I have this book and I want to get it out in the world and I can do that by tomorrow. And certainly you could probably do that. That's not, we want to put out really high quality work. And so which takes time. And so there's always, points in the conversation where we talk about marketing, where we might mention some of the services that we do. And then at some point I usually default to Joel, and I'm like, let's have a conversation with Joel, and I'll bring him back into the process, because there's more than just what we do for marketing. And that's where I think, when you come into a process like this, you've written a book, you've written a memoir, and you've written from the heart, right? You are not a publisher, and you're
Right.
not a marketer. And it feels very overwhelming to have to figure all of that out on your own. And you just want a relationship with someone who has your best interests at heart and who can help you make good decisions. And that's what we are really good at, because we build the relationships with people. And I buy all of my authors' books. I'm usually the first to buy them because I'm really excited for them. I'm really proud of the work that we've done. And it's, I buy them as like Christmas gifts for my family and stuff, because I'm like, oh my gosh, this book is so great. But at some point I like to bring Joel in, because he has knowledge and expertise that goes even beyond self-publishing, right? Like
Mhm.
the book launch and the book marketing and things like that. And so when people are asking questions like, okay, how do you get on a bestseller list? How do self-published books ever hit New York Times bestseller? That's a conversation to have with Joel.
Yeah.
That's where he can really he can kind of guide you towards the making the right decisions. And maybe some of that is hiring us to do some of it, but it's not always going to be.
Yeah. Joel, how do you get on a New York bestseller list?
Well, I mean, the New York Times bestseller is one of a category of bestsellers. So I think there's kind of two general categories of bestsellers. There's the sort of like daily, hourly, more ephemeral bestseller, like an Amazon ranking. So you can rise up in
Ah,
Amazon's category rankings really quickly. And it's not easy, but you can definitely go up. Something like a New York Times bestseller list and others like the, Publishers Weekly and Wall Street Journal, those are weekly lists. They don't take into account just pure sales. They
mm,
also want to know where the sales coming from geographically, and also type online, a mixture of online and then bookstores, which we call brick and mortar in the industry.
yeah.
And there's a bunch of brick and mortar bookstores around the country that report to the New York Times. Not all of them do, some do. And so and then finally, those lists, those big lists that are super prestigious, they have an editor who is looking at the titles to make sure, because there are companies that have learned how to game the system, or at least they used to know how. Now you can't really do it anymore. And so the editor is looking and saying, hey, is this book really a bestseller, right? It's like Google is saying, is this really the thing you want when you typed in that search term? So that's
Yeah.
their job, is to make sure these really are the cream of the crop. Now, some people would say, oh, there's a bias against, independent authors and it's just the establishment, blah, blah, blah. That's partially true. I've seen that happen. But for the most part, they're like, what are the books that are the best books that most people are buying in different areas of the country, bookstores and online, et cetera, and they're not using some gimmick to kind of launch themselves up the list, right? So,
Yep.
so how do you make that list? Well, you need to have a concentration of sales within a week. So it has to be over the course of the week. How many? It all depends on the time of year. If you're doing it in the summer, it's going to be less because less people are buying books in the summer, even though
Interesting.
whereas the fall, there's far more competition because everybody launches stuff in the fall.
Yeah.
I worked on a book launch campaign we tried to get a book on the Wall Street Journal list. We sold 8,500 copies in the first week and we didn't make it. But I've also seen books make the New York Times bestseller list selling to 7,000.
Huh.
When someone asks me again, and I do not advocate this for most people, when someone asks me, hey, if we're going to run a New York Times bestseller campaign, how many do we need? I would say, to be safe, you need like 13 to 15,000 to be safe
In a week. Yeah.
in a week, spread across online and brick and mortar and geographical distribution, and done in such a way that you're not gaming the system in a way that an editor can pick up on. And even then, they might not choose you. It's very crazy. So
Wow.
there's a lot more mechanics to it. I have an article about this on my website explaining in a lot more detail.
Awesome.
But yeah, that's kind of how you do it.
Yeah.
So
The main thing, how you do it is you get big.
Yeah.
I mean, at the end of the day, right? You can use any tactic you want, but if you have a huge platform and you've done all the work over the years to build that yourself, I mean, there's no free lunch, right? You have a chance to have that kind of sales volume. Then you can apply tactics to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Why don't you give us that email address? We'll get it again at the end, but so people can go and
The link.
read.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We'll send you a link and we can put it. Yeah.
Awesome.
Yep.
Jerry?
So why would a person want to write a book, right? Why do they want to write a book? I mean, there's a lot of people out there that are saying, I want to write a book because I want to change the world. I want to write a book because I just want to get my thoughts out. But why is it that a person want to write a book if they're not going to make it to the bestsellers list? Why do they write?
Well, so I'm a big believer that all motives for writing a book are valid.
Mm.
And I think it's very important. I think it's important to have that be your foundation, because if you can accept the real reason you want to write this book, then you're going to be real. And if you're real, then you can build something based off it. So if it's just vanity, that's fine. I'm a ghostwriter, right? I have a book that I want to write, and I want to have a traditional publisher publish it. You know why? Because I want to have that. I want to have like the respect that comes with being a traditionally published author. That matters to me. That's a personal egoic reason that I think has value. So
Yeah.
I think oftentimes that's a reason. There's a lot of people everybody says, hey, I've got a book in me. Everybody's got a book in them, right? They've got a lifelong story. It could be a memoir. It could be this thing that they discovered about, personal finance or co-parenting, that and everyone's always said, you should write a book, you should write a book. And they've always wanted to write this book. Maybe maybe you were a lawyer but secretly you were an aspiring novelist. And so you always wanted to have this novel that you wrote about, the 1820s in North Dakota, then write it for your own legacy, to say you did it, to give it to your friends and family, to have some posterity. So I think that's a very valid reason. But there's other reasons as well. There's some people want to actually build a career as a writer. And so that's fabulous too. It's going to take a long time, and you're going to have to, there's going to be a lot of rejection, and there's going to be some failure along the way, but you can do that. There's a lot of people that will come to us. They want to write a book because they think it's going to help their other career. If someone's a consultant, for instance, having a published book can bring in clients. It can establish you as an authority to get you more speaking opportunities or conference keynotes, that kind of thing. And so that's a really big reason to write a book too. Also a very valid reason to write a book. Another reason to write a book is the passion thing. Like you might, we interviewed this amazing woman. You should check out this interview. It's about to go up on our website. Her name is Crystalline Sanders Diggs. She's a children's book author. She was in marketing in Silicon Valley, and someone in her family close to her, a child, unfortunately, was the victim of sexual abuse. And so she went through this process of trying to help this young person in her life to heal from that. And along the way, they discovered that a children's book was the way to do it. So they wrote a children's book, and they found an illustrator, and they did these children's books about, what kind of physical boundaries children need to have. And so all of a sudden, this passion just like took over for her. And she just followed that passion and kept creating in service of that passion to help people. And she's now quit her job, and she's now fully self-published, making like a full-time living off selling her books, driven
That's awesome.
by passion to help people. Right. So there's that too. So I think all that's valid. I think all that's great and awesome and should be honored.
I think that the thing, because everybody does have a book, right? I'm helping my dad right now publish a book.
Oh,
He wrote
that's great.
it's like my little side project. He wrote down a bunch of stories of his youth, and they all center around him and his two brothers and some cousins. And, everybody's kind of getting older, and he wants to write these stories down and give them basically to his brothers. And so I said, yeah, I can help you do that. And so, he sends me all these stories, and I'm doing the formatting, and we're kind of going back and forth, and, in a way that it will, that someone could go and buy it. He just wants it bound to look like a book, and he can give it to his brothers. So everyone has a story in them. Everyone has a book that they could write. The question I think you have to ask yourself is, what am I trying to accomplish? What is my goal? Because if your goal is just, it's your passion project, it's your memoir, it's for you, it's really just for you, it's a personal achievement, indie publishing can really serve you and can be a great way to do that. If your goal is to build your business or, get noticed nationally by the press or whatever. And like Joel said, like all of these goals are valid, but there are different, depending on what your overarching goal is, there will be different paths for you to take to get there. Indie publishing is not going to get you to all of those goals, right? So I think that's a piece that we often work with. Is just, what are you trying to accomplish?
I think that's well said. I think, in the research of this, and Jerry is a remarkable researcher, and then the research with this, what we come across, everything from probably something on the gimmicky side, right? Like, give me $5,000 and I'll take you through this this 6-week course, and and at the end of it, you'll have a printed book, and we'll do an award ceremony, right? So you also get the sticker too. To the small little indie printers out there, that are still printing here in the United States, and they do beautiful work. They're going to cost an arm and a leg. But if it's that passion project that you want to pass down, or you want to give to, that's perfect. And I think, you guys fit into this extraordinarily unique. And I also think there's a real need for what you're, for what you're providing to your clients.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
The other thing that's so great, I think, about Jerry, your situation is, when you're passion driven and when you're led by that passion, again, like indie publishing can really serve you because you already have connections. You already have, a village that is excited to read your book and is excited to get to know that part of you. And so, in so many ways, you're already ahead of the game. They're not going to care if it's self-published. They're not going to care if it's traditionally published. They just care that you wrote a book and that they get to be a part of that and be a part of your community. And so I think, there are a plethora of ways that self-publishing can go, and we've seen them go all the ways. We've seen people launch their book and they're like, oh my God, nobody's buying it. I feel so defeated. And, I've seen people launch their book and, send out to their mailing list, hey, my book is live. And within 2 hours, they've sold 250 copies and almost have made their money back on what, and so but that person had a network, they had a village, they had people who knew that, this book was coming out, they were excited for it, and they had committed to purchasing it. And so I think that, again, like thinking about your goals, thinking about your options for publishing, and then going, okay, I already know that I have this village that is supporting me, that is excited for this, and that will grow. It will grow organically by word of mouth. Then indie publishing is a great option.
I would definitely agree with that. And, I think it's also talking about it, right? It's like I've been talking about this book like for 2, 3, 4 years now. I'm like, but the process of writing a book, if you
Mm.
haven't written a book before, and if you're like going to try to, write a memoir, there is a process to it, because you're visiting places of the past that may not be so easy to go back and visit. But then, it's like what Joel was saying, is that can you go deeper into that? And so if you are going to be writing a memoir, and, the person that's guiding you is like, can you go deeper? You got to find a way to go deeper. So, having that whole thing about self-care and resilience, it's a long process. And I'm realizing, and I have so much respect for everyone out there who's a writer, because it takes a lot. And there's moments, I'm sure you've experienced it, where you have one sentence like for 5 hours and you just don't know where to go. Can you all talk about that? Because please, I don't want to be the only one that goes through this.
Well, this is why, even though everyone has a book in them, so few people write their book,
Yes.
because it's hard.
Yep. I mean, to me, it's a long game, and just anybody who's ever done anything in their life, and most people have built something in their life, whether it be a career or a project. Most people know this when it comes to other dimensions of their life. And so you kind of got to take that same experience and advice and apply it to the writing process. Not everything's going to work out for you every day. You're not always going to be in the flow. That's not like getting into a flow is not requisite to be a writer. Like
That's
to be a
right.
professional writer, people pay me to write their books for them, and I'm just like you. I will spend weeks avoiding a project because and it's amazing. I've become the most extraordinarily productive, domestic spouse during that time. I'm weeding the garden, and my office is impeccably clean, and the dish, like my wife never has to do the dishes because I'm loading the dishwasher every night, and I'm like, I'll pick up Jackson from school today, blah blah blah, right?
Yep.
It's amazing all the lengths to which you'll do to avoid what's actually a very wonderful and fulfilling process. But that's just the dynamics of it.
That's so true.
And if you just keep going, you'll get there,
Yep.
but you
Yep.
It's
can't
so
let
true.
your distraction be your distraction, or your writer's block be mistaken as a symptom for you, or as proof that you are not a writer,
That's
Mhm.
right.
proof that you are not capable, because it's just gonna
Exactly.
happen. It's just,
Exactly.
yeah.
Yep. So so a follow-up question with that is, when you're working with individuals, and they keep going back, I'm just going to be talking about myself, keep going back and editing over and over and over again. When do you tell them that, okay, this is enough, and just move forward? How do you do that?
Well, it always depends on the context, and for me, I've been in different roles in different situations. I feel like there's a line, but there's a subtle and sometimes not so subtle distinction between editing that needs to happen and editing that's just paranoia.
Mm.
And there's a flip, right? So there's kind of like it's the 80-20 rule people talk about, perfect is the enemy of the good. Those are all real things where, I kind of feel like, you know, 3-4 solid feedback rounds is usually going to be good, especially if the people giving you the feedback are legit and you've taken it seriously. Once you get beyond that, there's a song remains the same quality that starts to happen, you know, that
Yep.
nothing's going to be good enough. And, you know, you start to kind of intuit and sense that this is more a deep psychological fear of putting yourself out there than anything.
Yes.
Um,
Yes.
so yeah, and so you have to kind of find that, and it's hard to let go at that point, because the thing
Mhm.
is, it'll never be done
Right.
perfect. It's never gonna be, you know. Sorry, I'm gonna say one more. There's this
Please.
incredible essay written by what is her name? The book
The
Anne
butterfly.
Patchett. Anne Patchett. She's a novelist, and she's written this. I think this essay is called "To Kill a Butterfly," and
Mhm.
she's describing a book before she's written it as the most beautiful butterfly she could ever imagine. It's technicolor. It's got colors that have never even been invented yet. It's the most beautiful, extraordinary thing. And then she says, but the process of taking that vision and turning into an actual book is taking a knife and stabbing the butterfly, then slapping it on the pavement and flattening it with a car. And
Wow.
that is what the final book ends up being. And so if she can even get just something merely acceptable, that is writing a
Right.
book.
Mhm.
And that helps me, because
Mhm.
inside of you, that's what you feel. Inside of you, you're
Mhm.
pursuing that butterfly.
Yeah. Well, let's close with this question. In this digital age, what's the value of a book?
In this digital age, what is the value of a book?
So I'm going to jump in first.
Yeah.
I'm the chair of the library board here in Tillamook County,
That's
and
not on your bio.
I know. Well, it says one of them is the library board,
Okay, go on.
and libraries face this question too, right? Like, well, what's the point of the library? Everything's online, and continually, year after year, printed materials, printed books are the thing that the library provides the most to. That's the thing that people check out the most. That's the thing that people are visiting libraries for. It's not for their digital resources. It's not for downloadable books. It's for printed materials, like astronomically more than anything else. And so when we get faced with this question, like, oh, libraries are obsolete. Well, no, they're not, because people are still coming to the library to check out a book, a physical book. And so books are not going anywhere. They are a part of being human.
Mm-hmm.
And there are other ways to consume books. I mean, audiobooks are on the rise, and a lot of people love. I mean, when I meet with my book club, which I think is tonight, half the ladies there will have listened to the book. They didn't actually read it. I mean, they read it, they just, they listened to it.
Yeah,
And so
yeah,
there's different ways of consuming books, but
yeah,
I just think that, books will always be a part of our world.
yeah. Joel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I don't mean for this to sound old school or antiquated or retro romantic, because
Hmm.
I think having lots of information quickly digestible at your fingertips is also great too. I love being able to listen to a podcast or just get a quick hit of something, or, you know, I don't necessarily have to read the whole book to understand what the insight is and it to bring value to my life. But I'm a firm believer in the value of long form content, whether that be long form journalism or books, because you can just bring nuance to a subject that you just can't quite do in a shorter form. Again, there's a place for short form content, and I like the explosion of it. But at the end of the day, if we're doing high level prefrontal cortex analysis, and again, I'm talking about nonfiction mostly here,
Yep.
um, we need things that are long enough to be able to allow the nuance and context required for higher level thinking to sort of simmer and come to a boil. And we all need that. I think that's, and I think probably, I think the pendulum is starting to swing back in that direction now. I think a lot of people are starting to talk about that, write about it. I think in 20, 30 years, I think we're going to be able to look back and talk a little bit about the value, and find this sort of Goldilocks between the short and the long.
Well,
Anyway,
and
that's
there's studies I have read that reading a book that, at the end of the day, sitting down and reading a book for 20 or 30 minutes relaxes your brain more than listening to music. And then,
Sure.
of course, there's all these reasons why we should be turning our screens off, and that's like a whole different conversation. But reading relaxes us. I had an author tell me one time, she wrote novels, young adult novels, and she said, well, I write these stories, I tell these stories, and I feel joy while I'm writing the story.
Mm.
And then the reader picks up on that joy, and they get to read this story about, time traveling teenagers or whatever. It has no relevance to like the world or the issues of the world, but it brings them joy to get, lost in that story. And so that was her motivation. She was like, I'm, out here to it can bring us joy when reading relax us. That's a big deal.
Yeah, it is. Yeah. Thank you for sharing that. Jerry, what do you think?
I'm always going to be for books. I like being able to hold a book in my hand. I just love being around books. I'm hoping that one day we have a library, like just with books, like from the floor all the way to the ceiling. And, I mean, it's like, I don't think right now with the digital age and everything, you can access these informations pretty quickly. You can, but there's something about it, like Sadie was saying, just the feeling of it, to be able to hold it, to be able to get lost in the pages. I think there's so much more value than something that you can just get over the internet. And yeah, that's my thoughts. And Sadie, I don't know if your mic is like going, it keeps going off and on.
Oh, it does?
Or is it just me
Not
hearing
a
it?
lot, but no, it is.
Okay.
It is not a lot, and only a couple times, but you do
Yeah.
come through, so it's okay. Um, I think for me, it is connected to the digital age. I one of the things I think about, a lot, and Jerry will sometimes roll her eyes because I think about it maybe too much, is I think we're playing with this thing with the internet and with mobile phones that we don't fully understand. And it's moving really, really fast. And we know that the younger generations aren't they're not readers yet, even as they emerge out of their childhood and into their teenage years, because they were given screens at a very early age. And I was listening to J.K. Rowling talk about her books, and one of the things she said was, my books are fantasy, and when you close that book, you come back to this world.
Mm-hmm.
The internet is the book that never closes. And that and boundaries are important,
Mm-hmm.
and books are bound, and I think that's an important reminder in our everyday world. And maybe that's one of the reasons why we like holding them in our hand.
Mm-hmm.
Yes,
Well,
maybe. So
um, go ahead.
how can people find you all? And well, we got all the information. I'm just going to go ahead and send everyone the information. But any specific things that you want to end with about your organization and what you do?
Yeah, I mean, I just, one of our big missions as a company outside of, providing author services is that we consider ourselves to be very educational. And so we do a lot of things like this. We like to interview people. We like to share everything we know for free. Sadie and I manage our blog together. I mean, Sadie runs it. She probably writes more of it than me now, but we publish a lot of content. It's very, very useful. So anybody who wants to learn anything from the philosophical to the practical about book publishing and promotion, you can check out our resources there. That's a big thing that we want. And we kind of feel like, hey, if people can derive value from that and never have to hire us, that's fabulous. And then if they're like, oh, you know what, I can do all, that sounds good and all, but I still need some help, then you can always give us a call.
Well, the
Sadie, you
website
want to
is
add anything?
oh, go ahead. Yeah.
No, just ask Sadie, did you want to add anything?
pretty much that. Like, check out our website. It's launchmybook.com. You know, we are on social media. You can follow us on Facebook and Instagram. We have a YouTube channel where we, you know, post videos when we have an opportunity to interview folks. So, you know, we're infinitely available through those different mechanisms of just author education.
Awesome. All right. Well, I'm going to end with a quote by Regina Brett, which has been maybe one of the most inspirational writing quotes of my life, which is, "Writers write. If you want to be a writer, write." So I really appreciate you two joining us today for this
Yeah,
conversation, and
absolutely.
I hope everybody who listens to it has an opportunity to enjoy it as well. So to give you just a little closing about the work that Jerry and I are continuing to do, you can find our consulting services at co3consulting.net. That's CO, the number 3 consulting.net. And we offer a number of different board and leadership development courses on our website. And if you are interested in our current publishing efforts, you can go to evolutionofaloha.com, where you will find the children's book that just won an award. Jerry, what's the name of the award? Do you remember?
It's the International Impact Book Award.
That's right. Uh,
And yeah, and you know, it's like there's information about the memoir coming up, and I really look forward to Joel and Sayde guiding me on that, because this journey is long. I'm finding it that it's difficult, but when you have the right people in place, it's not so heavy, and it's kind of fun as well too. So I'm looking forward to you know, working with that on with you all.
We
And
are
if
too.
you and if you are interested in if you're interested in helping us to move and pursue Aloha around the world, as Jerry's vision has laid out, then you can join our community and contribute at patreon.com/Plowline Productions. Thank you both for joining us today.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye, everyone.